Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Strategic Source webinar. Today's topic is groundbreaking innovations within the DMS space, and we'll have our CEO here at Strategic Source, Doug Austin, giving the intro, opening comments before we bring on our guest presenter today. This is David, the session producer. Thanks, everyone, for logging in. There is a Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner. You can type in questions. We'll be addressing as many of those as we can as we go through this 60-minute session. So let's get things underway. Let's start off with Doug Austin, CEO of Strategic Source. And Doug, take it away.
All right, thank you, David. Well, welcome, everybody. We appreciate you joining us today. We've got a pretty interesting topic. I know that in the dealer space, DMS is one of the most significant expenses that you folks incur. We've got a gal, Heather Hansen, today representing PBS, which is a very unique, innovative, and tested solution. Let me just speak a minute about the Innovative Supplier webinar series that you've joined today. Roughly every 2 weeks, we are putting a webinar on with suppliers that we think are innovative, very competitive, kind of game changers. And they tend to be organized around expense categories, audit and recovery categories, and new revenue categories. So we appreciate you joining us today. Keep an eye out for other webinars. We've got them tentatively booked out through December. And I think you're joining us. You're going to find some ideas that can have some significant impact to your expense line and to your profitability. So with that, I'm going to turn this back over to Heather Hansen. Heather is a regional manager of PBS. The title for today is Groundbreaking Innovations Within the DMS Space. So Heather, take it away, please.
Thank you so much. I appreciate the introduction, Doug. I'm pleased to be here as well. For those who are just joining the session, allow me to share a little bit about my background. I have been with PBS since 1995. The industry has grown up a lot since that time as far as DMS is concerned, and it's been exciting to see how things have evolved in that time. When I started with PBS, I spent about 10 years of my tenure with the company as a conversion assistant, helping people actually transition from their previous DMS onto the PBS system. And most recently, in the last 7 years or so, I have been working on the sales team, helping to introduce new dealers to our dealer management business platform. And through both those experiences, the time that I've had engaging with dealers across North America, I've had a lot of people share their challenges and the stress points that they see in the DMS, not the smallest of which is some of the ageism that's associated with the DMS itself, and the fact that many of the platforms that are out there are over 40 years old already at this point. And so it can become a bit of a challenge from a business perspective to maintain an accurate and business-forward approach when your DMS system is lagging behind. So today, we're going to talk a little bit about some of the things that are being offered within today's modern business platform, specifically within the DMS perspective that's offered by PBS. We're going to talk about some of the digital tools that add value with your data to help increase sales. We're going to talk about where reporting can add additional insight and some of the new features and functions that are available in reporting beyond a standard Excel spreadsheet and what comes coherent with the DMS platform. And then we're going to talk about how you can use that data to coach and correct with your staff based on the information that's being presented. For those that don't know, PBS has been around since 1988. We were, in fact, the very first company to release a Windows platform on Windows 95 when it first came out in 1995. As it stands right now today, we've got over 2,200 dealers across North America. I think that positions us as third or fourth largest in North America, and we are growing exponentially. Last month alone, we had 31 new dealers come on board with PBS, and on a fiscal perspective, we're doing 200 or more new installs per year. And I strongly believe that that is more than any of the other vendors that are out there. The reason why there's so much interest in what PBS has to offer is the innovative approach that we've developed towards doing business in the DMS platform. And the fact that we're expanding upon our existing infrastructure and not shrinking the way some of the other systems are doing. So in today's market, we have offices in Iowa, in Texas, Alberta, and Ontario. Those brick and mortar buildings support our development teams, our support teams, and our implementation and training teams. We have a head office is in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. That's where the business was founded back in 1988 by David and Marilyn Bradley. It's still a privately held company, and lots of family involved in the business at a corporate level. Having been there for as long as I have, the thing that really impresses me is the culture that's available through PBS. And I think that our dealerships see that customer as well. You know, I mentioned at the top of the slide that we were the first vendor to release a product for the Windows 1995 platform. And that approach to always wanting to be on the leading edge has continued throughout our history. Over the last 30 years or so, we've redeveloped our software from the ground up 4 different times, not just because there was something broken or something that needed to be fixed, but simply because the industry itself has evolved so quickly and so many different new tools have become available that we wanted to make sure that the product was ready to move forward along with the technical advances. I usually make a joke at this point and I say, you know, like think about your cell phone, for example, and if you had had the same device that you were using 40 years ago to make a telephone call as you're using today, and how cumbersome that would become to try and do business. And we feel very strongly that having that innovative approach is a core part of our culture. To go along with being the first DMS provider to develop for Windows, we were also the first DMS provider to have integrated email built right into our software, the ability to do email campaigns directly out of the DMS, the ability to text in 2 directions directly out of the DMS, and on and on and on with innovative approaches. We'll talk about a few more of those a little bit later on in the session, and look forward to sharing some of those key points. But it's an approach that we've been able to balance very nicely because we're not just a bunch of propeller heads in a room back in Calgary, Alberta, Canada. We are in fact working with the industry to develop our software. Every year, we host an annual dealer conference for our clients. It's in fact coming up in middle of October in Las Vegas. And our clients get together for a 3-day venue every year to share ideas, to learn a little bit more about what we've done with the software in the last year since the last conference, and to take an opportunity to share amongst each other. You know, you have a room of 200 or 210 dealers sitting together, all using the same software for the same purpose. It gives you a community that can share ideas with, that really adds value. And from those sessions that we do every year, we get our greatest inspirations to where we need to go next with the software. And the combination of our internal culture of looking for that innovative approach, for the external input that we look for from our dealer conference has allowed us to maintain a 99% customer retention average for more than a decade. In fact, I believe we're coming up onto 2 decades of time where we've maintained that 99% customer retention. And the reason why that value is there is because you're not just buying the software once and being stuck with that same piece of software. The software is in fact growing and evolving around your relationship. And as a dealer customer, it's a high value for the people that are using the software today. Now, going forward, there are a few things that have come up in the conversations that I've had the opportunity to engage with, especially over the last 18 months, associated with some of the core areas or business problems that come up in a DMS system. The primary one being, in today's DMS, there are, amongst some of the more traditional systems that are out there, there seems to be a propensity to have third-party programs that need to be added on to keep that 40-year-old core competitive in today's market. So there's a lot of vendor third-party relationships that have been added onto the system. We also see some challenges associated with communication because there's all these third-party systems that are involved, and you've got the service department using one tool and the sales department using another tool. As a result, the image and the actual commercial footprint that you're trying to establish at a dealer level can become shattered. And so an ability to standardize the communication footprint that you're trying to display becomes a core problem, as well as things associated with communication between the teams. When you've got a company that has one department using a tool for text messaging, for example, and another department within the same company using a totally different tool for text messaging, how do you manage the communications back and forth at an optimum level? So we're going to talk about those things. We're going to talk a little bit about the ability to work with your own data and introduce you to some of the tools that are on the market today that you might not be aware of, to share that information on how you can get better access to your actual data.
Heather?
Yes.
I want to remind people to ask questions via the Q&A box in the lower right-hand corner. They can just type in a question. I see one has come in. Would you like me to ask that now or just wait a few moments?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, here we go. How has COVID changed the landscape of DMS considerations?
Yeah, it has had a huge impact. If you think about the impact that COVID had on us all back in March of last year, when we were all asked to basically shut down our businesses and refigure out how we were going to continue to do business in the face of this, it was a big challenge. We had in the PBS customer base several dealerships who took their entire accounting departments off-site. We had warranty clerks that were working from home. We had clients that were using the built-in email campaigns to send out newsletters and communicate to their clients so that they could share information in a timely manner on how to access the dealership, what to do for an appointment, where to meet the advisors, or if they had a vehicle that needed to be returned under lease, how that environment was being managed. We had people using the texting and email campaigning that's built into the software to share information about the safety and health protocols that were being managed by the dealerships to ensure that the customers felt safe. And then as the year progressed, our customers started taking advantage of the opportunity to work remotely with their dealer clients. The PBS software itself is able to run on any device. So for customers that had an Apple iPad that was internet capable, Wi-Fi capable, or a Microsoft Surface or other tablet, they were actually able to, right at the very beginning, take advantage of mobility and attach that to the new processes that were being required as we navigated those first few months of COVID. And what was so exciting for our dealers is that nothing was required as extra purchases to be able to facilitate those changes in PBS. It's just part of the inherent technology to be able to incorporate that mobility and to be able to access the system from any location, providing you have the right security and permissions to do so. Was there any other questions that we had that had come up, Dave?
They're not right now.
Perfect. Well, let's take the opportunity at this moment to just take a look at what is happening around us. And one of the things we wanted to talk about today was vendor reduction. And it's a kind of an interesting conversation because, as you can see from the poll questions that we've put up, a lot of times in today's market, people just don't know how many third-party partners they're sharing their data with. So take a moment to take a look at the poll questions and let us know what you're doing. I think the poll is going to actually change as you're looking at it, as we get the questions coming in. How many different vendors are we actually engaging with? Who are we actually sharing our data with? Having the foggiest is my favorite. And it's not untrue. You know, what's interesting to me is in a small single-point dealer location where you maybe have between 12 or 25 employees that are using the dealer management system, the answer of 5 to 10 is different third-party systems is not unusual. What we have found in this industry, though, is that in a larger group environment, you have significantly more, 30 to 40. And they are to have you gain access to your own data and share that with the third-party vendors that you want to work with. In fact, in many states now, it has become law in the last 2 to 2.5 years that to manage the data and ensure you have access to that information. Just as a quick catch-up here, it does look like most people are either pretty equally unaware of how many third-party vendors are tied to the access of their DMS information, or up to about 10 different vendors. So let me share with you some of the things that we see from a vendor perspective and at a PBS level when we're approaching the DMS market and talking to dealers where we're seeing some of these third parties. They are communication tools that are being used between the different departments for authorizations and approvals on internal charges and things like that, scheduling tools, third-party calendars, appointment booking tools that might be being used by the dealership internally or by customers accessing and booking appointments through the web, inspection tools of different kinds that allow you to gather information, do a walk around with your from the service department and gather information associated with the vehicle initial inspection. And some of those inspection tools will include additional components for imaging or video reporting. You might see some third-party tools for e-commerce or texting, and it's so interesting how the market has evolved because in some instances you see the e-commerce options tied to the multi-point inspections, or you see texting get tied to e-commerce tools. Whichever way it needs to go, the fact is there are all of these third parties there for a specific reason, and the primary reason being a deficiency in the core DMS. So as an innovative supplier, PBS has worked very hard to look at where these components are and try to make sure that wherever possible, we've built these tools directly into the software. And so as an existing PBS customer, what we're looking at on the screen right now is just a handful of the tools that we have available. Communication between departments, we have a vehicle make ready and a do bill or a we owe tool to be able to track information going back and forth between the fixed ops and variable ops departments. For scheduling tools, we have an online scheduler that's built directly into the software for the service department to use that can have multiple departments. It can be shared on either a lookup basis by technician, lookup by calendar view, lookup based on skill codes and fill rates in the shop. We also have online scheduling tools that are controlled by the dealership as far as what's available to your guests from a booking perspective, and gives the dealership the opportunity to actually see that information embedded directly in the DMS as opposed to having it come through as an email that needs to be retyped in by somebody after the fact, as long as it got caught in the first place. And from an inspection perspective, PBS has a built-in multi-point inspection focus. All of the OEM branded inspection tools are available, plus the ability for you to customize your own inspection tools and embed videos and or images associated with those stories.
Heather?
From an yes, go ahead.
An additional question has come in. Would you like me to address it now or bring it up shortly?
Go ahead.
All right, here it is. Sometimes dealers don't want to give up a vendor relationship they've worked hard to incorporate within their business. How does PBS respond in this environment?
That's a great question, Dave. You know, from a business-to-business perspective, while PBS is making all efforts to try and incorporate as many of the tools that we're being told about as required in this industry within our core software, we definitely understand that there are some relationships that have been in place for years. My husband was a sales rep working on the sales floor at a Ford dealership for over 10 years. And then he moved into a fleet and lease position, and then he became an F&I manager. And during that time, he used multiple third-party systems within his dealership experience. And while sitting at one dealership, he probably went through 4 or 5 different CRMs trying to find something that actually fit the vision of the dealership. And when I go back to that experience, one of the things that stands true for me is the fact that sometimes when you've made a change and you've finally got something that's working well, you want to continue working with that. And at PBS, we totally understand that. We don't charge exorbitant rates for our vendor partners. In fact, we have a very simple, easy-to-use interface that works between us and your third parties that allows them to actually choose where the different interfaces are and how they want to engage. So for example, with a company like vAuto, they have their integration with PBS is instantaneous. You can't even tell that there is a interface there. As soon as you input the information from one system, it automatically feeds through the other. You look it up in the second system and the information, the data is right there. Other systems that are out there, they've chosen to do once a day or once a transaction update. So it's totally up to the vendor. We have over, just in the Pacific Northwest alone, which is the territory that I manage, over 365 vendor partner relationships. And because the technology is current, because the propensity that we have for taking advantage of technology is kind of part of our culture, our vendors find it very easy to do business with us. So happy to continue to work with your existing third-party vendors if there is a relationship that you wanted to keep. Great question, Dave. Thank you. All right. So from a guest and a contact communication perspective, when we're talking about third-party tools, you know, PBS has seen so many different CRMs that are out there, and every one seems to have a different flavor or a different focus, whether it's inputting information into the CRM so that there's trackable notes and timestamps and data that's being managed and reported back to the OEM, or whether it's communication, either as a preset schedule of communication that you want to have, or whether it is a flow that's associated with after an event or before an event, an appointment reminder, or a CSI follow-up. Those tools need to be part of today's dealership experience and the guest interactions that you have. The biggest challenge that we have is in making sure that you have the consistent communication across all of the different departments. So within the PBS platform, as part of our engagement process, when we first start out with a new dealership, we always look at what you're doing today to find out what are the communication tools that you're using today in each department. We establish a consistent signature for outbound headers and emails. You have the ability to preset defaulted communications so that you have the information at your fingertips to be able to send out, whether that's by email, whether that's by text, or whether it's a to-do for a phone call that somebody needs to make. And then we also add to that with the ability to do list extraction and email campaigns to look at specific target markets. For example, you may want to send an email campaign out to introduce everybody who's purchased a vehicle in the last 6 months to the service department. Or you may want the service department to reach out to everybody who's purchased a vehicle within 50 to 75 miles of the dealership who's never come in for service in the last 18 months. So there's an opportunity for you to use the communication tools that we have built into PBS across all departments. Traditionally speaking, in the DMS world, our CRM is just for the sales department. At PBS, because we've actually built the CRM right into the software, we actually have the ability to use that CRM follow-up for both the sales department, the service department, the parts department for SOP notifications, or even for the accounting department from an accounts receivable perspective. Good. All right, so providing that consistent message to our guests as they come through is one of the best way to ensure a positive guest experience. And so if part of your existing plan or part of what you're looking to provide to your guests is a consistent message on a regular basis, no matter where they come into the dealership, again, that's what having a built-in CRM can assist with. Where it becomes challenging is when there's a dissimilar communication tool across the different departments, and one system is pushing everything as a text, and another system is pushing everything as a phone call or as an email. Having the ability to blend those communication styles and the timelines for those communication across all departments is truly an innovative touch. Awesome. I'll go ahead now and take an opportunity to put in another poll. Again, it's just an opportunity for us to talk to each other a little bit, share some information back and forth. When you're looking at those third parties and you're thinking about how those third parties that you're aware of engage, for those that know about them, where would you say you're using them? Are you seeing them across the entire organization? Are you seeing them isolated in singular departments? How do we have that go for you guys? I'll just wait for a second for some of those poll questions to come in. Awesome. So the majority of the poll questions, the results have been other. Does anybody, David, can we do this? Does anybody have an opportunity to share what they mean by other?
If they put something in the Q&A box, then we'd be able to see what people respond to with.
All right. So while we're waiting for any of those Q&A clarifications to come in for other, I can see there's a question that's come in from Chris. Chris is asking, what are the primary reasons dealers move to PBS from either CDK or Reynolds & Reynolds? It's a great question. Chris, I would say the primary reason is the culture of our company, the fact that we are looking to be more than just a vendor. We have a direct relationship with our customers well beyond the initial purchase and installation phase through the ongoing meetings that we have every year at the dealer conference and the opportunity to engage directly with PBS programmers, developers, and owners and other clients as part of that relationship. That's a huge reason that people move to PBS. That the technology that's built into our software is another key reason that people look at PBS from a vendor perspective. The software is continually evolving, and the business model that we use has those enhancements and those upgrades coming to you at no additional cost. They're just part of the ongoing development of the software, where with a traditional system, there's normally a recurrence that happens on every 3 to 5 to 7 years, where you're having to renegotiate and repurchase in order to get enhancements. That just doesn't happen with PBS. And the combination of those components really do add up to a very different style of relationship that has been impactful for the growth of PBS and our existing clients. Awesome.
Heather, I see one of the responses as far as other from Chuck says performance management reporting.
Performance and management reporting. Awesome. Yeah, so from a business perspective, whether it is an internal tool to help from a management perspective, whether it's a departmental tool to help with communications from the guest experience perspective, or whether it is something directly associated with interdepartmental communications, all of those are the core areas where we have third-party communications. Dave, let's go back to the presentation now, and we'll take an opportunity to continue on with some of the different components. Talking about the internal communications across the teams, for example, it was a big eye-opener for PBS at one of our dealer conferences about 5 years ago to hear about the struggle that dealerships are having between the variable and fixed op side of the business with things as simple as a WEO. So many dealerships are using an internal purchase order to manage that communication when a commitment is being made to a component of a vehicle installation that comes as part of the sale but still needs to be installed. And when we look at that environment, we have a lot of different communication styles, whether it's paper or whether it is an internal purchase order, or whether it's a text message, or in some instances still a sticky note that's going back and forth between the different departments. The big challenge seemed to be that there just was no standard method of making sure that communication stayed active until some such point as the activity was installed on the vehicle. And as a result of that, we developed an interface that shows up as just a window on the desktop for both the fixed ops team and for the sales team, so that they can see any of the WEOs or due bills or accessory sales, whatever you want to call them, that are part of that transaction as they've been assigned to the fixed ops team and as they stay open. At any point, if you inquire on a customer, or you inquire on the vehicle, or you inquire on the actual deal, you'd be able to see that commitment remains outstanding. And so building that communication tool to help improve the communication across the different teams was extremely valuable to the PBS clients when that enhancement was added. We also had a new enhancement that came out about 3 years ago that allowed our fixed operations team to improve communications between the technicians that were logging into the system, the advisors, and the parts department. So on a request-by-request basis, you can actually message back and forth between the different departments and gather that information on a line-by-line basis with timestamps and user notes as the communications go back and forth. That as well was hugely valuable in time savings, and in instances where there was a problem with delays in a specific department, it allowed our dealers to actually pinpoint where those challenges were coming from and correct them. The other thing that we've seen from a communication perspective is a challenge within some of the more traditional DMSs in that there are silos of customer information. You know, the parts department has their information, the service department has their information, and the accounting department has their information, and so on. And as a result of that, you know, you think of something as simple as an extended warranty or a protection package being added onto a vehicle, the amount of additional steps or work that is required for another member of the same organization to see that information, it can be extensive. Re-entry, time wasted doing that re-entry. In PBS, we use a single customer and vehicle database, and that information allows us to share the actual information from the F&I office. As soon as those additional warranties or protection packages have been added, they're immediately available to the service department or parts department or anybody else who has access to the vehicle record when they look it up from their department. That single source of customer and vehicle information also allows us to ensure that as one department is communicating, as long as the users have the right permissions, they can see the communication thread and the outbound communications that have been occurring with that customer. It's no longer a hard brick wall between those departments. You now have the ability to see the entire customer at the center of your organization, which truly is the way they belong. And thirdly, as a benefit, then we have the opportunity to see all of the information in one place. In many dealerships today that I talk to, it's a challenge because they've got a third-party system for email over here, they've got a paper system over there, they've got PDF documents in another area that they have to look up. In PBS, everything is hosted and standardized in one location, and as a result of that, we have all of the information nested together. Mm-hmm. So, John, I can see there's a question here. How is data pushed to third-party partners and in what format? That's a fairly technical question. We have an API that we use, an application protocol interface, where through our data partners, they're allowed to gather the information that they would like. We use a double sign-off perspective with both our dealers and the third party that's looking for the information to make sure that what the dealership is looking to share is actually what's being transacted. And then it's up to the third party themselves on how they want to pull or push information back and forth between PBS. It can go in either direction. It's totally up to the third party that we're partnering with. I hope that answers your question. Awesome. So I think the next the communication point that we want to talk about a little bit is the mobility. And in today's environment, we do see a lot of different tools and mobility, and the word mobility has become almost as ubiquitous as CRM in the fact that it has so many different meanings. In PBS, we've done our best to make sure that our business platform is system agnostic. So we are a Windows-based platform. We do use Microsoft Azure Cloud for a hosted system if you want a hosted system. But as far as what brand of PCs do you want to use, what brand of printers do you want to use, there's not a lot that we require as proprietary with PBS, as long as it supports a specific operating system level. That's really all we need to do from a business perspective, and to make sure that your system is as flexible as possible. So when we look at some of the new mobility apps that have been developed as part of our core business platform, we have things like sales representative application, the PBS Connect tool that allows a sales rep to be able to look up their prospects, enter in information on notes, gather pictures, both prospect trade vehicle as well as the vehicle of interest, the ability to send emails or documents to gather signatures and be able to look up inventory and all the other components of a sales rep's responsibility right from their own phone. But at the same time, nothing is actually sitting resident on the phone. It's actually part of the core DMS, and they're just using the app to access that information on their phone. On the service side, we have mobility services that are associated with the vehicle arrival and the customer engagement process as part of the vehicle arrival, whether it's dropping off the vehicle after hours and filling in information about their vehicle as part of the drop-off, or whether it's the greeting, the walk-around, and the ability for the dealerships themselves and the service department themselves to be able to gather information about that vehicle and then share that with the technical team as a follow-up. All of that is immediately part of the mobility tools that PBS has available. We have a nice video that's been generated that shows the engagement from booking an online appointment right through to getting status updates of where the vehicle is from the customer's perspective that I'd be happy to share with you as well after the fact. And it's just another layer of focus from the PBS perspective that we're looking at not just the dealership experience, but also the guest experience in our ongoing development of mobility access and software development. And we have another question that's come in, so I'll just pause here for a quick moment. Jessica is asking the financial statement audit as well as auditor's request and SOC1 report in order to obtain system reliance. Does PBS have this available? Yes, of course, PBS has the ability to extract information from a financial statement perspective and from an auditing perspective from any requirement, whether it's a government audit or a third-party audit or or an internal audit. The layout of the information that is being provided matches the standards that the industry asks for, and from a data perspective, I'm not aware of any time that we've ever had a concern. The main reason why that occurs is because there's nothing in PBS that gets archived over time. All of our information is kept real time, and so at any point you can actually go back in history and request information for as long as you've been on the PBS system to extract that as a report. And we've worked very hard to try and ensure that when you call a report on screen, it's not a static document. You have the ability to export that information out as easily as you can to call it up on the screen, and whether that's saving it as a PDF externally or whether that's importing it into Excel, it's as important to be able to get the information out of your system as it is to put the information into your system as well. And that kind of segues really nicely into another area of topic. And we've only got about 15 minutes left, so I'm going to hold the questions for the moment until we get through the next few slides here, and then we'll open it up for questions and answers again at the end so that we can kind of get through the next couple core topics, and then happy to revisit any questions that you might have. Going back to our opening slides, and one of the things that we've seen as challenges in the industry is that people seem to have the idea that from a dealership perspective, you're limited to Excel as the only tool that you have available. Some of the DMSs have third-party systems that they've partnered with, or they may have some internal business development reporting tools so that you can generate an ad hoc report with specific fields, and PBS has that information at that point as well. You take the information out of the core DMS and you make that a list. And what you do with that list, whether it's vehicles that are coming due in the next 12 to 6 months from a lease, or vehicles that are reaching a specific mileage, you choose how you want to use those business development reports. And I think industry-wise, people are used to doing that already. And of course, those tools are available in PBS. But beyond that, there's tools that we have available called big data or business intelligence. And from a knowledge perspective, we want to make sure that you go beyond that first rung of the ladder. And so I've put up a little sample of what you can do with your data when you use business intelligence tools, things that take it from just being lists and list formats and make it usable and interactive data, where you have that graphical interface that you can click on any one of the different sections of information and pull it up and expand on that data, where you can overlay different databases. We have one of our dealerships that has a video recording process in their showroom, and they're actually live recording all of the interactions that are happening. They've engaged that video recording in with their sales data so that they can look at the store's the footprint of deals that are closing versus deals that are not closing, and how the human interaction and movement within the store may or may not be impacting it. We have other stores that are taking third-party information like Google Analytics and laying that over top of the data, or from a side-by-side perspective in a group environment to be able to look at 7 different sales departments side by side, as opposed to looking at individual financial statements and reports for each of the different departments. So being able to look at your data and actually paint a bigger picture of your data instead of just looking at a static report is another area of development that has happened in the DMS industry and in business in general that in many cases has never been explored in the automotive side. So I'm excited to see the opportunity for us to share a little bit of that with you, and I hope that it's an area that you would be open to exploring as well. I've got a question here from Keith. I'm going to save that for just a little bit, Keith, and I'll come right back to you regarding your question. I'm just going to continue on for a second. So from a business perspective, as we're looking at the different components that we've talked about over the first 40 minutes or so here, the platform that comes with PBS is continually changing. It's continually evolving. Our business model allows us to help that system grow around you to make sure that you're staying in touch with today's business needs. The single customer and vehicle source that we have across all of the departments ensures improved communications both internally and externally, and allows that improved knowledge sharing to allow you to provide an enhanced guest experience. The built-in CRM ensures that we have consistent dealer imaging and communications, and it allows more than just one department to take advantage of building on the customer relationship and the ongoing communications. And lastly, our data analysts will work with you to help develop the elements for your key performance indicators and the reporting that you might want to gather out of the DMS instead of relying just on the canned reports that come within the system. From an e-commerce perspective, one of the questions that had come up as well was to talk a little bit more about where e-commerce comes into play in the innovative and more modern DMS platforms that are available today. I'll give you the best example I can. In PBS, we have the ability from a business perspective to launch a work order, and as soon as the customer says they're going to charge on their credit card, we press a button, it pushes the dollar amount over to the credit card machine. The point of sale machine is used to authorize the dollar amount. It closes off the customer portion of the work order, and the transaction is resolved. instead of the current process that many dealerships have where somebody's manually typing in the number, the information is being then hopefully put in correctly, the work order is going back and then being closed manually. It just saves that much more time. But we've taken it beyond that to the point where you can email the copy of the work order to your guest, have them pre-authorize and pay for the funds directly off the email or text version of that work order, parts invoice, whatever it might be. From a deposit perspective in the F&I office, you can get a deposit electronically and send them a receipt. And even from the accounting perspective, the ability to have your statements go out electronically and have your guests be able to open up individual invoices off those statements and pay those invoices electronically. That's all built in and part of the core PBS dealer management system. So from a business perspective, when we're looking at not just what can I do from a work order and a parts invoice perspective, we're also trying to make sure that we're just expanding upon the tools of today's business and making sure that those are part of the business platform as well. Questions that I get on a regular basis, some of them are a little bit mundane, but can I just get one piece of the CRM? Is your training and what's your installation and training process like? Do you use proprietary and hardware in your deployments? Do you work with a specific set of OEMs? Are you able to handle large groups? So generally speaking, we can handle any of the different OEMs that are out there. We've got partnerships that have been in place going back as far as 1995 with many of the different vendors that are out there. We've got some that are fairly recent and fairly new, so new markets for us, and we may have reached out to you as a result of that. But yes, of course, we can handle the different vendors. We wouldn't be in business and being on a technical edge if we weren't able to grow with all the different OEMs that are out there.
This is Doug. As we're getting ready to wrap up here, one of the key questions I want to ask, and it's a question that the dealers ask quite a bit, is what kind of cost reduction opportunity is available with PBS versus a typical dealership? I've seen dealers that have saved 70, 80%. What is your experience from a pricing standpoint? And if you don't mind, we'll wrap it up after this answer, if you would, please.
Sure, that's not a problem. It's a great question. From a business perspective, it really depends on the size of the dealership. We do our implementations based on the number of concurrent users that are actively on the system. But when we look beyond just the core DMS, when we look at all those third-party spends that are happening as well, that's the number to target. That's the number that you want to be measuring against when you look at PBS. We are competitive in the market. We are not at the top end of that scale like some of the traditional systems are, nor are we at the bottom end of the scale. We're traditionally right in the middle. Generally speaking, though, we do tend to see a reduced cost for our clients strictly because of the fact that there are so many third-party components that are actually built into the core PBS. That is not the main reason why PBS customers come to us, though. It's not the cost. It's an extra benefit that comes along with. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, it does. Well,
Awesome.
Just as a reminder, we'll have a recording on our website, and we can make that available to all of the attendees today. So please feel to reach out to us, and we'll get this information to you. Go ahead.
Yeah,
Heather.
I appreciate that. Thank you so much, Doug. And I would say, too, for any of the questions that have come in that we haven't had an opportunity to answer directly yet, we'll follow up on those questions with you right after or shortly after today's session as well, so that you aren't left unanswered at all. To get a hold of us, best way is to reach out through our toll-free number and the website below. This will be part of the core information that's shared afterwards, and we'll look forward to hearing back from you.
Heather, outstanding. I know this is a fairly complex topic, but I know dealers are certainly interested in looking at new alternatives as compared to the legacy systems that are out there. So thank you very much, Heather, for your presentation today. And I think this is probably the most questions that we've ever had in one of our webinar series, so that's great. We've got a very engaged audience. So thank you. Great job. So copies of today's presentation will be available. We can make those available on MP4. Chris Austin, if you reach out to him, 612-386-3898. Again, 612-386-3898. Or email him at caustin@strategicsource.com. We're happy to get the information to you. Looks like we've got some last-minute surveys. If you would please fill that out, we'd be much appreciative. We want to make these innovative supplier webinars better as we move forward. And I would encourage you that we have webinars scheduled for just about every 2 weeks. Some interruptions with holidays and things like that, but keep an eye out for that. And we thank you very much for attending today, and please feel free to reach out to us at Chris's email or his phone number, and we're happy to provide more information. Thank you, Heather. Dave, I'll turn it over to you.
All right. Thank you, Heather, and thank you, Doug. Again, a replay of today's session is available after today. Otherwise, we appreciate you filling out the post-session survey questions, just a couple there on the screen as we conclude. And otherwise, thanks to everyone for attending today, and we look forward to you joining us on future webinars with Strategic Source. Have a great week, everyone.